come back to equilibrium for the whole region.
So are they defined as aftershocks? Or
they are everything that is
okay.
aftershock 7.
Good, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to clear a point. You said that the old rock just off the spit and where the earthquakes have been occurring is very fractured and therefore is unlikely to produce a 7. You said that the Kaiapoi fault lines are not so fractured but go off more often. Because of that, are they less likely to produce a 7 too?
Yeah. The issue really is two somewhat different things. The first part of your question is the condition of the basement rock, the greywacke that makes up, if you like, the spine of New Zealand and underlies much of the South Island. Those rocks, as Kelvin mentioned, have been through 100 million years plus of tectonic deformation. And so they're very fractured, they're in a fragmented condition. And so there are a lot of fractures on which earthquakes and displacements can be accommodated. So that's kind of the reason why we're seeing these fairly complex aftershock patterns and the sort of sequencing, if you like, of the aftershocks is a function of the length of the faults and the numbers that exist in the basement. The second part of your question is about the Kaiapoi structure. Now, the issue around the size or the magnitude of the earthquake that a fault could carry is more to do with the length of the fault and the amount of energy that's stored on that fault ready to be released if there was to be a substantial earthquake. For a magnitude 7 to occur, you'd actually have to rupture pretty much the full length of that fault line. So if you take the Greendale fault that ruptured during the Garfield earthquake, it's give or take about 30 kilometres in length, magnitude 7 with those complications that Kelvin mentioned. The faults that have ruptured subsequently are much shorter. They're of the order of sort of up to about 10 kilometres in length. So the magnitudes are accordingly at a lower level. And then there's the other issue, and that is that you don't necessarily see all of a fault line rupturing in one go. And so, you know, there's a lot of imponderables around the answer I can give you, but hopefully that gives you some
So
feeling
in
for that.
Kaiapoi fault, are there lengths of the fault that would be 30 kilometres in there?
I think if you measure it from one end to the other, it's getting close to 30 kilometres, yes.
So it could be.
It potentially is that scale, but I mean there are other fault lines not far away which are on a similar scale. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Moore.
Mike Moore from the Wickham Community Board. I just wonder, probably Kelvin, whether there's been any link with hydrology and the lowering of the aquifer systems in Canterbury and earthquake activity.
Oh, right. Yes, I've seen that around question asked quite a lot. No. I think the water withdrawal, these earthquakes are coming from 10 kilometres, 10 kilometres deep. The aquifers are in there in the top few hundreds of metres, so it's not physically possible that the water withdrawal has triggered earthquakes. Not like we're seeing. You can see sometimes you know, around large dams and things like that, a little bit of a connection between water and earthquakes, but not in this situation, not due to water extraction is not the thing that's triggering earthquakes. Now, having said that, the earthquake itself did change the aquifer, but that's the other way around question.
Thank you.
Yeah, down to back.
My name's Steele Murphy. I'm from the Apartments Recovery Group and Apartments Residents Association, and I've listened to all the scientific evidence with great interest. But my question is, you mentioned the period of 30 years. I'm coming up, I'm retired. 30 years is a long time. How many times am I going to have to sit through liquefaction and the extreme violence that we had in the last long? I've been through all of them, and whether it's my perception or not, but the violence this time around was extreme. It was throwing myself and my grandchildren all over the house, and my husband moved his arm.
So the question is,
How often
how, you know, statistically speaking,
Yes.
Over the next 5 or 10 years, or is it the 30-year period, are you likely to have to go through that sort of thing again? And can we put any sort of a number around that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, if the earthquakes do continue to be Christchurch-centric, then of course these magnitude 6s will produce liquefaction. There is, you know, that's fairly clear in the areas of sensitive soils. If the earthquakes were to migrate further away, then they won't produce the liquefaction in the sensitive soils in the middle of the city. So it depends very much on the evolution of the earthquake sequence as to whether it stays to be essentially city-centric or nearby, or whether it migrates or whether it stops. That's a really difficult question. I think the most sensitive soils that's played into, of course, some of the land use planning decisions. We know that the 5s do not. I mean, the likely earthquakes going forward are the 5s, and they don't really produce significant liquefaction. At least they maybe a little bit here and there, at least a few kilometres away. To really be damaging in relation to liquefaction, it does need to be a fairly proximal 6. It could be a magnitude 7 from Hanmer or somewhere like that as well, or a magnitude 8 from the Alpine fault. So all of those sort of probabilities have been taken into account when making some of the decisions about land zoning. Sorry?
It sounds as though some of the decisions might have been a bit chunky.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, that's not really not my...
Okay, so I think rather than sort of editorialising too much on our experts, they're here to provide information. I don't think they're making the political decisions or any other decisions along the process. But I come back over to this side of the room.
At one stage during the lectures at the University of Canterbury, there was a description of a fault line running parallel to the Port Hills fault that ran from Hagley Park to Brighton. Has the existence of that fault been confirmed, and what's the likelihood of its rupture, please?
Okay, the question was to do with the activity that occurred on Boxing Day last year, or the previous year, in 2010, and the subsequent investigations that we did in April and May using the Canadian seismic equipment to see if we could image any fault activity beneath the city centre and extending out towards the east side of the city. And we have presented at a number of the stakeholder sessions over the last few months that information. We do see evidence of active faulting in the subsurface, both beneath the city central area and extending out to Brighton. Remembering that we've only got the 2 lines of investigation, one which coincided with Barbados Street and the other with Brighton Beach, the style of the strata deformation, if you like, in the subsurface is very similar, and so we have tentatively connected those. The faults are very similar in orientation to the fault lines that were surveyed offshore by the NIWA team at the same time when they were running their surveys. So yes, those faults are definitely at present, but they're very subtle deformations at tens to hundreds of metres beneath the surface, and they provide some context for what happened with the Boxing Day earthquakes. Now keep in mind that those events again are triggered much deeper down. They're not triggered in that near surface environment. They're I think 7-8 kilometres deep or something like that, and extending up to 4 kilometres. So that's within the basement rock beneath the city. What was the second part of that? So the chances of a larger earthquake occurring on those, well, that's always a possibility just because they are there, but I think the comment I'd make is we've had a significant fault rupture on the structure beneath the Port Hills in February, and I think that will have relieved to a large extent any stresses that were building up in the rock beneath the city. And so getting back to the comment Kelvin made really is that that's the fault that did the business. Maybe when we think about it, and maybe when we analyse it in the coming months, the Boxing Day sequence 2010 might have been an indication that things were starting to really get critical on that structure beneath the Port Hills. But I don't see at this stage that that fault is likely to generate another magnitude 6, for example, right beneath the city, because we've had one already.
So you're saying that they're actually consistent, they are the same fault?
No, they're not the same fault. There are two faults closely spaced, sub-parallel to each other, but they're not the same structure. In that survey, we did also see the Port Hills structure running under South Brighton area. So that's a separate structure, but we did image that coming up towards the surface as well. Yes. Okay.
Okay, I'll just take a couple more questions because we are getting to the end of that time. I have a media question here.
Yes, I just want to ask you about the sirens. It says the council at the moment is working on installing some sirens in Aliwant. It also says though that the risk is very low, in fact unchanged from the earthquakes. So were they sort of already in the pipeline, or are they as a result of that?
Yeah, they were already budgeted for. What we're looking at actually is how we could extend that system and add more in. But I think what we've heard is it's really only part of the solution for people. So if you have a locally generated tsunami, it's likely to be, as we've heard today, a relatively small event. The big danger for us are the major earthquakes that occur further out in the Pacific or as far away as South America, which is where we've had historical tsunamis before, and we get approximately 12 hours warning around those. So we are, however, committed to putting in a tsunami warning system because it's a peace of mind issue for a lot of our community as well. I don't know whether Murray Sinclair from City Council or Defence, is there any more that we can add to that?
No, we are working on the locations identified something like about 47 sites between Waimari and Sumner. We have started installing those this financial year, but we'll probably won't get the whole lot in July.
Okay, so it was budgeted to take place in the financial year that we're currently in, so that work should be in the main underway and hopefully getting close to completion by the end of our financial year, which is at the end of June. So the staff are working on that process at the moment. The one thing I would say, and it was said before, is that we are in the city now, just about each and every one of us, sort of, backyard seismic experts. And what we are hearing is that if you get a significant period of shaking, like maybe 1, 2 or 3 minutes, that's an indication of an event somewhere which is bigger than, say, the 40 to 45 second shaking that we got from the 7.1 all the way back in September 2010. So if you are in an area and you're perhaps on the beach or you're very close or in a low-lying area and you experienced a shaking event that went on, should we say, 90 seconds, 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I think the earthquake in Japan, which was a 9, ran for how long, Kelvin?
Yeah, 3 to 4 minutes.
3 to 4 minutes. Then you are talking about an event which you won't know at that point where it is actually taking place, but an event which is capable of producing a reasonable wave. And you would take your own steps as a sensible citizen, having experienced that and with all of the knowledge we've got from 9,500 earthquakes, to consider what you would do. If it was me, I would be gathering up the grandkids and we would be definitely, without panic, moving steadily away from the waterfront or getting to higher land if I was around one of the hillside suburbs. So that's going to be more effective for you than any tsunami siren system that we can ever actually put in place, or a warning system. Having said that, we think that the warning system is important to our community, and we think that we should put it in place, and we think that it might have some other uses as well, so it is something that we are in the process of doing.